Are you seeing a nice green grassy field? Thank you so much to the club for giving Bob and I the opportunity to talk about our favorite place to visit in the fall and our favorite pastime, hawk watching. Just for time's sake, we split up talking about raptors to 2 parts. So tonight we're just talking about 5 Buteo species that you can see in Illinois. 1 is pretty rare. And then next week, you're all automatically registered if you care to join us for talking about accipiters, eagles, falcons, and harriers. And that night, we won't be talking about the Hawkwatch, so we'll just be dealing with ID, and we'll have time to show perched hawks too. So the Green Valley Hawkwatch, I think Steve said this, we're starting our 15th year. We're under the auspices of Hawk Migration Association of North America, which I'm just gonna abbreviate to HMANA. We're up there every day. We're really lucky we can drive up to our site instead of, let's say, climbing a mountain with our gear like you have to do at Hawk Mountain in Pennsylvania. The only advantage to our site is that it's up a little higher and it gets us closer to the hawks. There's no geographic feature that funnels hawks our way like a mountain ridge or the lakefront. So that's it. We see 360 degrees. We can see 5 miles pretty much around us comfortably in binoculars. To our west is Springbrook, to our north is the Arboretum, to our east is sort of Waterfall Glen. This is what it looks like to hawk watch. You're just looking up at the sky constantly. And the reason that I said, oops, sorry about that. The reason I said it's hours of scanning, we're an inland site. So because there's nothing to funnel hawks our way, they're just kind of randomly coming over the land. We never see as many hawks migrating as you will at the lakefront, or, you know, if hawks are going through a choke point of 2 Great Lakes or down the Appalachians. But we do hope that we're filling in the gap with how do hawks leave Canada, Minnesota? How do they go overland? Do they go overland? Yes, they do. And then every so often we see a hawk. There are 2 ways to participate at the Hawkwatch. The counters have more experience. They're in charge. They're looking at the weather. They're writing down the number and species and age of migrating raptors every hour. It would be nice if we could just look up and say that's a red tail, but it's more useful for research if we can say, well, we saw 20 immature red tails today and 1 adult. It kind of gives a little bit better feel for how is the population doing. And hawkcount.org is where all the hawk counts, Hawkwatches put their numbers. The neat thing that you might want to check is all the hawks funnel down from North America to Texas. So Hazel Bazemore is a neat site to check to see how many hawks are going through there. And then all the hawks go through Mexico to Veracruz. So if you check out River of Raptors, late October, you can get like 2 million, they can see 2 million hawks a day down there, which I think would be really awesome. The rest of us are looking for hawks. We're scanning. It means we're in our binoculars, we're going up from the horizon, slowly 4 or 5 views, moving over, slowly coming back down. We're not so concerned with what's happening at the horizon, except we try not to miss, you know, merlins that might be going over the treetops. Right at the horizon, we see local turkey vultures meandering around, young Cooper's hawks fighting, pairs of red tails go up. We have to pass through all those hovering red tails, and there are a lot in our area. And we're trying to find the hawks that are actually pretty convincingly moving from north to south over our site. And because we can see all directions, we have this line of water towers about 1 mile behind us. And as long as they go past that, we feel pretty convinced that they've gone. We're part of 32 sites in what HMANA calls the Central Flyway. So you can see it's a whole lot of land. It's 1 million square miles. Number 8 is Illinois Beach. Number 9 is Fort Sheridan. I think they're 6 miles apart. And you can see we're more inland here. At 13, we like to watch Hawk Ridge up in Duluth to see how many birds they're getting. We don't necessarily think they're coming our way, but it gives us an idea of what's kind of leaving Canada. And altogether, we count about 380,000 raptors every year, spring and fall. What happens with those numbers? They get analyzed. So if you're concerned about the state of raptors in North America, check out rpi-project.org. Just new in the last couple of weeks, they've gone from 25 to 60 hawk watching sites. And if you click on trend maps, you can kind of see what's going on, at least it's beginning data analysis, what's going on with our raptors. Unfortunately, most of them are in decline. Bald eagles and turkey vultures, as you can see, are increasing. Kestrels are in trouble in the east and okay in the west. Broadwings are doing better west. Some of the falcons are steady. Mostly habitat loss, unfortunately. I'm going to have some quiz slides just to keep us on our toes and sort of keep us awake during this time. So what would you guess is the most common migrating raptor that we see at many hawkwatches in the central flyway? It's the turkey vulture. Just notice how high up his wings are held in a V. They teeter around a lot, right? We've seen them. We get about 650 a year, but some hawkwatches get thousands. One year, it was the day before Thanksgiving, I think it started to snow at the Hawkwatch. And to our west, like 12 or 15 turkey vultures lifted off and went south. I think they waited till almost the last possible day they could migrate. And how about the most common migrant bird that we see? What would you guess? You probably know this. Sandhill cranes. So the next few slides, I'm gonna let our regular hawk watchers share their favorite memories of the site, just so you get a feel for what it's like up there. Yes, we're busy counting hawks, but a whole lot of other things are happening. I think one year we had 39,000 sandhill cranes we counted, and that's mostly in November. That was our highest year. Our highest day was about 17,000 sandhills, I think. Here's Lie. Sometimes the cranes land at the Hawkwatch. We usually see between 1 and 5 or so whooping cranes right around the beginning of, or the middle of November, usually like the 14th, it's like clockwork. Last year that whooping crane came through on the 7th. Truth be told, that morning we had already seen a couple of whooping cranes at the Hawkwatch. I drove home, I wasn't ready to be done. I was hearing cranes really low over my house, looked out the window, saw this whooping crane, ran out to the driveway, took a picture, called the Hawkwatch and said, hey, I think if you look at the Darien Water Tower, you'll probably see a whooping crane. And they got in their scopes and were able to see it. I'm 5 miles east of the Hawkwatch, so that tells you how useful scopes can be. Oh, this has got to be our most eagerly awaited raptor to see, golden eagle. Nancy and Ann just loved seeing it. Most of us have, this is our favorite kind of bird to see, and it's where we've gotten, most of us gotten our life for golden eagles up there. We'll talk about these next week, at least how to separate them from balds. Aging them is a trickier prospect. We get some falcons. So you can read Jeff's memory and Karen's. Normally we don't see falcons sitting right in front of us on the fence. But to our west is a glider hill. It's higher than our site, and that's where the district lets model airplane gliders fly, which seem to be irresistible targets for like young red tails, peregrine falcons. They just love to chase them. Who doesn't love watching a peregrine? Here's Bob's favorite memory. Beautiful bird to see in DuPage. Probably the last, you can see them at O'Hare, and if anybody was birding at the time when this one was sitting on an apartment building across from Yorktown Mall, that might be the only other time it was in DuPage. We see a lot of other interesting birds too. That picture up at the top right is a Sprague's Pippit that Bob found, and Jeff spent a lot of time trying to photograph it. He had that confirmed by none other than David Sibley at Anderson's bookshop in Naperville when he was signing his new tree guide. We've had a few visits from Say's Phoebes. The dragonfly migration up there is incredible. They're foraging all over our hill. And then just as far up as you can see, as far east and west, hundreds and hundreds of dragonflies every minute. And we get, migrating waterfowl, gulls, loons, all kinds of passerines, monarchs, butterflies. So it's really awesome to be part of that spectacle. Some of our favorite visitors, at the end of September, we have Lapland longspurs almost every day. And then at the end of October, we start seeing snow buntings every day. American Pippits are up there every day. I mean, it's just like the tundra, right? It's kind of short grass, and those are beautiful. And notice those Arctic birds know exactly what to do with a tree. They know how to perch in a tree, which they may not see in their breeding territory. This is a long story. I'm going to be quiet so you can read it. If you're looking at this on a phone, it has to do with a very brave or foolish squirrel that ran over the whole site from top to bottom. I'm not sure we're ever up there that there's not 4 or 5 or 6 or sometimes more red tails flying around, maybe young ones. The other day, 6 young Cooper's hawks were perched on the fence. I don't know what they were talking about. I wish I could have added Tony's charming dialogue. It was like, what are you doing? This to the squirrel, and the squirrel's like, I'm gonna do it. And his buddies are like, no, you're not, don't, you're crazy. So that does happen on slow days. You know, we make up stories or we try to see other things like coyotes and deer. I think just all of us love how restful it is up there and quiet. We're kind of above the fray of modern life, and we get to see these, you know, beautiful birds flying overhead, beautiful hawks. But the best part is to enjoy the highs and lows with just a great group of people. I was glad that Stan's memory involves our group. Everyone's helps everyone see birds, identify hawks. We're all learning more every year from each other. It's just a great group. And just be careful if you come visit us, because you could turn into this, someone with a big stack of books, and you're coming up no matter what the weather's like. As an aside, I do think hawks are a nice way to introduce kids to birding, because, you know, they're big and they're pretty cool looking. Something to think about. To visit our Hawkwatch, come up on the weekends in September and October. If you don't want to sit in a hard picnic bench, bring a lawn chair. Always bring some layers. It was like 62 today, but the wind was blowing steadily from the northeast. I had a hat and gloves on. So throw a hat and gloves in your car. If, on the other hand, if it's sunny, you need a hat. Northwest or north winds are better at our site. Maybe northeast isn't bad. We're the first driveway south of the Greene Road Trailhead parking lot, which is south of 79th. You have to turn west. There used to be a big banner that said, go to the overlook on the weekends, but I think the district is trying to minimize groups, so that's not there anymore. So just look for the next driveway west. See, you can only turn west there. At the lakefront sites, northwest or west winds are good, better than for us. If you'd like to visit those 2 sites, contact the coordinators. It's Janice and Paul Sweet for Illinois Beach and Adam Sell for Fort Sheridan. You can either DM them from Facebook, or you can look at hawkcount.org, click on Illinois, and then click on each website or each Hawkwatch, and you'll see their contact information. And just pencil in September 26th and 27th could be in the middle of prime Broadwing migration week if we have the right wind. So just kind of keep that in mind. I think visiting a Hawkwatch adds to your birding knowledge, visiting a bird banding station, trying to go birding somewhere else in Illinois with a different suite of birds, like down in the Shawnee. You know, those are all good experiences to round out your birding life. Any questions about the Hawkwatch?
Vicky, it's Bob. There was one question from Hazim about why the 6 eastern sites are in the central flyway. Hazim, the simple answer to that is that years of observation has proven that the birds that migrate there are funneled to the west.
Mm-hmm. They don't go down the Appalachians, yeah.
It's not based on any imaginary line. It's based on the bird's behavior.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. It does seem kind of artificial, but yeah, the hawks move west there, not east over the Appalachians. Kind of neat. Any other questions about the Hawkwatch? Okay. If you think of anything, just interrupt me. So this fall, just kind of have this in the back of your head. Hawk Mountain did this really neat transmitter study. Can you imagine climbing up to like Broadwing hawk nests and putting transmitters on female hawks and young? And they wanted to see during migration, are they flying the whole time or are they stopping? So what they found was that Cooper's hawks, sharpshin, broadwings, they spent about half their time flying and about half their time resting and hunting. The exhibitors didn't visit suburban yards. They were in forest preserves or state forests or national parks. Just keep in mind, they do have to make it through migration. Broadwings start at the end of July and they may make it to their winter site by December. So they're traveling a long time. They need their rest. They need to eat. If you're an avid photographer, you know, use your car as a blind, keep your camera charged and with a good memory card right next to you on the seat so you don't have to get out of your car. If you're birding and see a hawk, just give them some room. Oh, this talk by Dr. Goodrich, it's a great introduction to hawk watching and also the history of Hawk Mountain and all the cool research that they're doing there. And just some resources to help you on your way. Laura Erickson's book is great. It's got a picture, a silhouette, and some facts. These two field guides are called enhanced field guides. They're pretty bulky. The artists in our group may know what this means, but he's painted hawks with gouache on mat boards. None of the backgrounds is white. It's all gray or blue or green. And at first I was a little taken aback by that, but what it does is make all the parts, the white parts of the hawks really pop. Very thorough treatment of red tails, except he doesn't believe in the northern subspecies, which we're gonna just dabble in a little bit later. We always have hawks from every angle and hawks at a distance, either up on the picnic table or in one of our cars if it's too windy. The Raptor ID app, I use that a lot. It has great photos. Unfortunately, the Hawkwatch International wasn't able to come through with videos tonight, so you could see how these beautios fly, but that just gives you an excuse to actually come to a Hawkwatch to see them fly. If I'm struggling with a raptor species, I'll watch the video with Jerry Ligori's narration, and then I'll watch it 3 or 4 times without sound so I can really key in on how is that raptor flying. What can I memorize about it? What can I really take in from that? Amanda has some resources. This DVD by Jason Haas, he spent 4 years videotaping hawks flying. So it's just hawks in flight. And what's nice is he'll put a sharp-shinned hawk next to a Cooper's hawk. Those are hard to tell apart. Side-by-side videos of them soaring, gliding, or like a bald eagle and a golden. So that's also a really good resource. So how do we ID hawks in flight? You know, we're really looking at shape and how the hawk is flying. Size is hard because if you're seeing a distant speck by itself, it's really hard to figure out how that is. I mean, intellectually, we all know eagles are big, ospreys are big, turkey vultures are big. There's the big beautios are like red tails, red shoulders. Red tails, rough legs, red shoulders, Cooper's hawks, northern hares are all about the size of a crow. So shape is a lot more important when we're looking at a bird in the sky and we're just trying to figure out, does it have big broad wings like a red tail? Does it just look like a flying 2x8 like an eagle? Does it have a long tail like an accipiter or a short one? Does it look kind of dainty pointy like a kestrel? And also they can shapeshift. In Hawks in Flight, they talk about if you see what looks like a big beauty or a big accipiter coming your way, you think it's a goshawk and it turns into a red-shouldered hawk when it gets closer, that can happen. Maybe a hawk far away looks kind of like a northern harrier and gets closer and you're thinking it's a buteo and it's a Swainson's hawk. Wind affects how birds fly. Last week, it was really heavy kind of westerly winds and the hawks, the red tails flying into the wind, had their wings held up really high like a turkey vulture and their tails were folded. You could see their upper tail coverts. They just look like giant harriers, all the red tails. Light makes a difference. Our light angle is low in the fall. Everything in the morning tends to take on kind of a yellowish cast. Late afternoon, things can look reddish. So everything doesn't turn into a red-shouldered hawk, but it might be a red tail that looks, you know, washed with red. And the angle of the hawk can really affect whether or not you see it and you can identify it. And for flight style, we're looking at how does it soar? How big of a circle does it make? Red tails, that song from Oklahoma, I know, lazy circles in the sky. Red tails do these nice big circles. Never looks like they're working really hard. Whereas a broadwing, when we see them lift off, they're lifting up within seconds and they're heading south. So they make really tight circles, get up really fast and go. What is the posture of a bird? Like how is it holding its wings? Red shoulders hold their wings forward in a C shape. What does a hawk look like when it's gliding towards us? If it's kind of a big long-winged bird in an M, maybe it's an osprey. How does a hawk just fly? How fast is it beating its wings? Are there gaps in between? Does it kind of flap, flap, glide like accipiters? Or, well, I'm gonna give away a quiz if I say more. And how is the hawk using space? A merlin is maybe gonna fly directly from point A to point B and not really mess around. But a kestrel might get bounced around in the sky. A sharp-shinned could get bounced around. Can a hawk hover? Can it kite? Only certain species do that, and they'll help us like put together the pieces and say, okay, that is this hawk. And the only way that you figure that out is by watching them constantly. So the hawks that we see that aren't migrating, we just get a long chances to watch them, just how they behave and fly. The challenges of hawk watching are, it's not like birding in the forest preserve and trying to match up field marks or trademarks of nature, they used to be called, which I like better. And then saying, oh, okay, you know, it's a red bird with a big orange beak and a crest and a black mask. I know that's a cardinal. It's really harder than that. When you're looking at a hawk from afar, its colors are going to fade, but its patterns will sharpen. And we'll go into that in a little detail in a bit. So we're not always completely certain, but we're pretty confident, almost when you can't see a hawk, that we can tell what it is. And if we can't, that's okay too. We are not shy about saying it's an unknown buteo, unknown accipiter, unknown falcon. If it's just too far away, we can tell the family, but we just can't get closer than that to identifying it. Remember, sometimes we only have seconds to see and identify a hawk. Even if it goes overhead, we're looking at a silhouette. It's not going to show its color. So is that fun? Yeah, it is. It's a lot of fun. You just kind of have to think on your feet and just go for it. So what is the shape of a buteo? It's kind of a stereotypical hawk, right? It's got really wide wings here at the body. They're pretty long, head's kind of medium-sized, tail's kind of medium-sized. As opposed to this eagle, I think honestly the proportions of this eagle is the head is shorter than the tail. I think that's probably a golden. But look what happens to accipiters. Their wings shrink and their tails lengthen as a rudder because their job is to fly through the obstacle course of branches to get prey. And a falcon, it just looks like a pair of flying wings. Its job is to just be fast and, you know, go over shorebirds and waterfowl and pick the one that's slow. So the size of the wingspan is just to make us all remember that this smaller number, males are smaller than females. There's not a lot of overlap in these particular families. Just something to know, we didn't put a goshawk here. A female goss can have like a 45-inch wingspan, which is going to be the same size as a male red tail. So it's something to think about. If you're fairly new to birding, then what you want to do is focus on adults that we can actually see in DuPage County and look at perched birds as much as you can. So what are these buteos? Well, obviously this is a red tail. We can see the orange tail. Get comfortable if you're new, just looking at a lot of red tails. There's a lot of variations. Some have more white, some have lighter heads, some have thicker belly bands, some don't. Just get comfortable with them and then separating them from young red tails. Broadwing hawks nest in our county, but they're not common. This is a broadwing hawk. Look at his, it's kind of a bulky hawk. Their head, to me, looks too big for their body. There's a lot of red streaking here, mostly concentrates in the upper breast, under the neck, maybe down the sides of the wings. There's a very thick tail band here and a white one here. The red-shouldered, isn't this like, I think this is our prettiest buteo, but namesake red shoulder here, checkered wings. If you're lucky, you can see 3 black tail bands on this tail and a lot thinner white tail bands compared to this. And rough legs, we're not going to usually see until very late October, November, maybe not even till December. So get to know these buteos well, the adults, add immature red tails, then you can start adding the immatures. I wish that hawk watching was that easy. So what are these buteos? Every one of these has either strange lighting or a weird angle, which is how we see them at the Hawkwatch. And we tend to see more immature birds. The immature raptors tend to migrate a little bit before adults. And it makes sense, right? All these immature birds cannot stay around their parents' territory. They have to kind of move on. So they're going to migrate first and the adults later. So if you want to write down your answers just to yourself, what's number 1? What's 2? What's 3? 4? And 5? Did everybody have a chance to look at that? I'm hoping we're going to return to this. You can kind of quiz yourself and see how you do, but I'm hoping by the end of the presentation, you know exactly what these are and you can age them. just to give you an idea of like abundance sort of in our county, Broadwings are our most numerous raptor species that we see, and they're very concentrated migration peak. It's really the last week of September. We're seeing a few here and there, but the last week in September is when they're really going to come through, hardly any in October. Swainson's hawk has a little bit more extended peak. We hardly ever see them. They're not common in Illinois, although having said that, Luis saw one last week at, this weekend, I think, at, yeah, it was Saturday, at Mallard Lake. So that might be our one for the year, I hope not. Red tails peak later in October into November, red shoulders the same, and rough-leggeds we probably won't see till after Halloween. And we don't see too many of them anymore. They're a lot less common at all the hawkwatches. Are they not coming as far south, or are they just, their habitat's getting affected? So another quiz question, true or false? Eastern red tails, which is what we see, 12 months out of the year, show a white base of the tail, which you can see from a distance. It's true. If you look at these upper tail coverts, you can see that from pretty far away. You can also see that from the side. Just something kind of strange about this hawk to notice is you see these paler windows out here. Normally we see those on juvenile birds. So I'm not sure how old this hawk is. He hasn't completely molted in his central tail feathers here. Can you see? Normally those are replaced first, I think. So I'm not sure how old he is, but we'd call him an adult at our site. How do you know we're seeing an eastern red tail? It's fairly simple. Look at these patagial bars on either side of the head. Most are going to have a belly band. Not everyone, but most, a great majority. There's going to be an orange tail on the top with no barring. The juvenile, patagial bars, belly band, his tail has these nice fine barring on it. Both of these birds show really nice thick white throats. Eastern red tails have white throats. At this point, we know that they nest from the Atlantic coast all the way to the eastern Rockies, but they have recently found them as far northwest as southeast Alaska. So they're a pretty dominating kind of species. So really for UDOID, you just have to figure out, is it a red tail? And then you're almost done. But we're gonna complicate that a little bit in a minute. So is it a red tail? If it isn't, why isn't it? This is a great shot of a head-on red tail. Notice it's in a slight modified dihedral, as we call it. So his wings are held up a little bit in a V to his wrist. Look at these white spots on the wrist. We call those headlights. That's kind of diagnostic for a red tail. The rest of his wing comes out flat and his wingtips flare up. This looks like a really big, bulky hawk, doesn't it? You can almost see the rest of his white belly here too. So again, what color is that hawk? I don't know, but I can see that he's got a pattern that I can focus on. Western light morphs, I'm going to go through a few subspecies, not to confuse us all, just so you know that they can be out there. This light morph western is not that well documented east of the Mississippi, and you can see why, because it resembles our eastern. But maybe those of you who are in the club who are these awesome birders and photographers can take a stab at trying to find these. The western light morph, look at these patagial bars, the same as our red tail. Belly band, a red tail, but can you see this fine barring all over? And just this bird just looks darker underneath, doesn't it? It's kind of washed with orange. If you saw this hawk from the top, it does not have white upper tail coverts, usually. None of these traits are 100% foolproof. Sometimes hawks show traits of another subspecies, but usually you won't see white upper tail coverts. So then your kind of eyes should perk up and just take a harder look at that hawk. It's a lot easier to tell intermediate morphs and dark morphs. They're just much more striking. We have a winter raptor survey down in Kankakee County, and 3 years running we've had an intermediate morph hawk there. Notice the little barring on the wings of these two birds. It doesn't go to the wingtips. They're black, black, black. Keep that in mind when we look at the next one. Very few of these come through Illinois. I think if you travel west, if you're going to look for snowy owls or you're going to the Mississippi to look at eagles, maybe start looking for some of these, go north in Illinois. They do tend to migrate from northwest to southeast. Here's another dark red tail, but it's a Harlan's. We've only had 3 in 14 years. I bet not a few more that probably have visited Illinois. It's just something to keep in mind. They can have a variety of speckling, white speckling. This adult doesn't show that at all, right? It's just dark. Look at the adult, does not have a red tail. It's kind of black, smudgy gray. The juvenile is just banded all over. If you notice, his barring on his wingtips goes all the way out to the tips. They're not really black. Would you be able to see that in the field? Only really close and with great light. It's got a white throat, which is diagnostic for Harlan's. And also if you see a dark red tail coming towards you and it has headlights, it's probably a Harlan's. You won't see the white throat on a dark red tail or the headlights, as far as my reading tells me. Something to look for this winter and fall. Opposite extreme, the Kreider's subspecies, again, super rare. DeVita's picture shows this white head, white base of the tail, a lot of white on the wings. It's a juvenile probably, right? It's got windows. It looks like it needs a coat of paint up there. If we could flip him over, we might see either no belly band or a tiny belly band like this. Not sure what this bird on the right is, except that it was really pale. Like, is it faded because it was a spring bird, or is it got some Kreider's genes? Not sure. Red tails can show a lot of variety from bird to bird. They can be leucistic, albinistic, they can be paler. Some of our red tails have really pale heads. If their plumage is faded, it can look lighter. Some look really dark, like all the red tails that were born this year. Wow, they're just beautiful at the hill. They're in perfect form and they look really dark. All their feathers are kind of dark. We're gonna dip our toe into seeing if we can find any northern red tails in Illinois. Not common at all. Brian Wheeler, who did those 2 field guides I talked about earlier, does not believe this. He thinks it's just a darker marked eastern red tail. But Cornell has embraced this subspecies, nests all through the arboreal forest. You're looking for kind of 3 things, but really 2. You see how the neck bands dribble down from the head to the belly band? You see how the belly band's a lot darker than the color of the head? On this adult picture, you can see it even nicer. The neck streaks dribble into the belly band and it's really dark compared to the head. And then this 3rd photo shows how dark they look. This particular one doesn't have upper tail coverts, but I saw some pictures on eBird where they do, so I'm not sure if they were northerns. Anyway, the person that photographed this, it was so dark they thought it was a rough leg at first. Do we get these? We might. They do migrate from northwest to southeast again, so it's another bird to look for. Bob and I thought we had one of these, or no, I think it was a western on the Christmas count, but we just couldn't get close enough to get any decent photos. A couple of people have photographed northerns in Illinois that we know in the club. But just some cautions to think about when you try to get fancy and assign a subspecies to a red tail. All these red tails breed with each other. So then what do you have? You know, the individual hawk that you're looking at. You can have a mix of traits from hawk to hawk. So try to find multiple features, and if you can't, just enjoy the fact that it's a red tail. They are really awesome flyers. Any questions about red tails?
Vicky, it's Bob. One question came up about what do you mean by wing panels?
Oh, should we go back to that? You see this rectangle towards the end of the wing? It's paler than the rest of the wing. It looks like he needs a coat of paint on that. It's just paler. That's a window. From underneath, it's called a wing panel. So this is a window. Sorry if I misspoke. Does that make sense?
I misspoke.
And we find those on young birds. Every young red tail you see is going to look really contrasty. It's going to look white, then dark, dark, then white. Does that answer that person's question okay?
I think so, but recognize that that's also sometimes dependent on the light that
Definitely.
and it really helps to be looking down on the bird, which doesn't always happen.
It doesn't. We're lucky to do that because it's 200 feet up, but you're right, it doesn't always happen. Any other questions about red tails? I know we went through the subspecies fast. It's just for you to know that they might be out there this fall, late fall, and into the winter. They may come here for the winter and stay.
Hey, Vicky,
Yeah?
do you record, or how stringent are Hawkwatches about trying to record all these subspecies? I mean, do they?
Yeah, we do. We usually add a note that it's like it's an intermediate morph or a dark morph. We had a Harlan's stay around for a couple of days, which was really helpful to be able to watch it. So yeah, we do try to note that it's a subspecies because, again, not well documented really, you know, in the eastern United States.
Okay, so yeah, any information you can get, you try to record for them.
We do, as much as we can. We try to be as specific as possible, be as useful as possible.
Yeah, thank you.
So this buteo, if it starts out looking like maybe a big Cooper's hawk or a goshawk, but it turns into buteo, it's most likely going to be a red-shouldered hawk. It's a forest bird, right? It lives in forest, so it kind of behaves like an accipiter. How do you know it's a red-shouldered hawk? There's one really great feature to look for is this light comma of feathers out towards the wingtip, comma, crescent. It's really obvious in this juvenile bird, not quite as obvious in this adult bird, but you can still see it. Normally they have squared off wingtips. You can see that better when they're in a soar. This adult is in a glide, so his wingtips are pointed. Look at the tail. It's very dark with these kind of thin white chalk lines on it. Very dark, thin white chalk lines. There's more and thinner ones on a juvenile. I think again, it's probably our prettiest buteo, except then when I see a rough leg. From above, it's just gonna look like a brown hawk. This upper tail covert's covered with brown, just disappears from a distance. Far away, it just looks brown, but you can still see the wing crescents on this juvenile. They're tawny, they're not white, so we know he's young, plus he has all those tail bands. So look at this immature bird from, it's maybe 500 feet up. Can you tell what color that is? I can't, but I can see these crescents. I can see the black tail with these nice white thin chalk lines. He's holding his wings a little forward in a C. So I know that's a red-shouldered hawk. So again, that should be our mantra, right? Colors fade, patterns sharpen. You don't even have to really memorize, you know, what are his undertail coverts doing? It's just, it's got some crescents. If we only have a few seconds. You see crescents, red-shouldered. Questions about red-shouldered since we went through them that pretty quick. There weren't any patagio bars on those birds, right, or belly bands. But on the other hand, broadwing hawks kind of have almost no field marks. What we're looking for with broadwing hawks, this candle flame shaped wing, some people are calling it a paring knife blade now, where it's straight here and curved at the back. That works too. If whatever works to help you memorize it is great. See this nice black outline of the broadwing? Nice black tail tip with a white band here, almost the same width. The juvenile has that too. It's just paler, but he has this line and he has this tail. If you zoom that young broadwing out like 1,000 feet, it just looks like a chunky white hawk with pointed wings. None of these streaks show up. From above, you're just going to see a brown buteo. It's just, any of this white is going to disappear and it just looks brown from the back, which is a great way to tell, you know, which buteo you're looking at. If it's just an all brown hawk, then you know it's not a red tail, you know it's not a red shouldered, doesn't have crescents. But the bands on the adult is kind of black, white, black tail band sandwich. They do show up from above. And sometimes you do see them turning and banking before they climb fast up to the sky. I'll let you read Margie and Al's first favorite memory of the Hawkwatch.
Some people have all the luck.
You know, Karen and I were there that morning and we had not seen very many hawks at all for the first 4 years, at all. And then this morning they come, like good luck charms. and we saw the most hawks that we've ever seen. On a day like this, when it's prime Broadwing season and they've roosted in the local preserves overnight, we try to get to the Hawkwatch at 8 instead of 9 so we don't miss liftoff. I wish everybody could be there for this. As soon as the sun warms up the air a little bit, we start to see like 1 and then 3 and then 7. And pretty soon there's this spiral of Broadwings. Maybe it takes them 3 seconds to get up in a thermal and then they start leaving and to go south. But that's just one. And then we'll see another one on the east and some more all the way north. And pretty soon the sky's just filled with Broadwings lifting off from all around us. We don't count them when they're in that spiral. We wait till they're out of it. It's just too confusing. They're too close together. But as soon as they start streaming, and mind you, they're not going in nice V's like a goose or something. They're kind of all over the place, but it's easier to see them when they're streaming south. Then there's going to be a lull for a couple of hours, and then the migrants from further north are going to start coming through. Sometimes they lose air over our site, and it's hilly, so I think it's a little bit of a thermal developing area, and they'll start to climb again right over our site. And some of them are just sailing over. If it's a blue sky, they're really hard to see. I've been scanning a blue, just a straight blue sky with no clouds, and all of a sudden in my binoculars, these Broadwings will appear from above. That's kind of a weird feeling, but that's what happens. I'm sure we miss them because they can go higher than we can see. And oops, sorry about that. And you see how in this young Broadwing, there's just not much to hang our hats on for ID, kind of plain. That's absolute. Some people say the absence of field marks is the way to tell it's a Broadwing. I'm not so sure. But look at how straight the secondaries are. Not sure I really noticed that in flight, but I do notice that in photos. Just kind of a straight line. No other buteos have that. Here's an idea about some of the numbers that we get. So last year we, oh man, we tried to break 5,000, but we just couldn't do it. So that was our highest season yet. Many Hawkwatches had their highest Broadwing counts in a long time. And you can see 2013, we hardly saw any. So that's really variable. It depends on the winds. At our site, if we have southwest winds, we see a lot of Broadwings, west winds for sure, northwest definitely, north. So just, again, pencil in the 26th and 27th. Feel free to text me or Bob. We'll be there that weekend because you know we're going to be there unless it's raining. But if it looks like a good weekend, you check your forecast and we've got any kind of west wind, north wind, then text us and see if it's worth coming up at 11. If it's hopping, we just might text you back a Y for yes. Just one last look at these. This is a young Broadwing, right? It's got a kind of a pale line back here. It's not that easy to see, but it doesn't really have any field marks. Remember, zoom this hawk out. This is just white. But look at this adult on the right. Look at how that white tail band is just so vivid and stands out next to the black one. We know that's a Broadwing. Then we might look at the outline too, and we'd say, we'd know that's an adult. If we have like 1,000 coming over, we may not be aging them at all. They're just coming too fast. Any questions about Broadwings?
Then just asked a question about the tail band. One way of answering that is that probably when there are large numbers of Broadwings moving, we're only able to age 5 to 10% of them because just the sheer numbers of them, and most of them aren't close enough to really be able to see that prominent tail band, which would identify him as an adult.
Exactly, exactly. And you hope you're seeing more immatures than adults, but it's hard to gauge that when, you know, hundreds are going over. Any others about Broadwings? We're just going to spend a minute about Swainson's hawks. This isn't going to remind you of this for long, but just something to think about is if you see a hawk flying towards you that reminds you a little bit of this bird that also flies in an M shape because it has long wings, long arms, and long hands. Yes, an osprey has an eye line. It's a whole different bird, but at first it may remind you of an osprey. Swainson's hawks, not common in Illinois at all, right? Barely in migration, but what you're looking for with the Swainson's hawk is this beautiful two-toned wing. Look at this grayish black trailing edge. There's a hood, like a bib here, I'm sorry, a bib, a white throat on this light morph, Their wings, look at how long this hand is. These are open range birds and they migrate down to Argentina. They have to have long wings to fly. Most of the time on buteos, you know, every buteo has 10 primaries and they start kind of here, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. But on the Swainsons, their outer primaries, the 4 of them are the longest ones. So if you see a hawk, you may not see this in the field, but maybe you get some pictures because you're trying to document for eBird that you actually saw Swainson's hawk. You may be able to count those 4 primaries. Broadwings have those too, but I think Broadwings, there's other clues to tell you that it's a broadwinged hawk. The other buteos will show 5 long primaries. And again, you don't really need them because you have all these other identification features. My arrow here is just to point out, I think this tail is a little cocked back in this photo, but look at how long the wingtip is. It will be to the end of the tail. These are just really long winged birds like roughlegs. And that's an intermediate morph, obviously, with a light morph, and there's dark morphs too. Oh, I forgot to say there's light, intermediate, and dark morphs of Harlan's hawks too, just to add to the confusion, and they all mate with each other too. Questions about Swainson's hawks? You can see them in the spring occasionally in Illinois, and also in September, October. And also there's some nesting pairs up in Kane County. I'm not quite sure what was happening with the one. It's near a town called Hampshire on Chapman Road. You can check the eBird checklists and see if you can try to see them flying.
Hey, Vicky.
Yeah.
We had a question more about the Broadwings and the Swainsons, unfortunately, in a way. How do you count so many birds at once?
Oh,
I know
yeah,
there's techniques for that. I have mine, but what do you guys do?
Again, when they're spiraling up, we don't bother because it's just too hard to count them until they start streaming and they're sort of in a line or sort of in a crowd. We divide up the sky into fourths. So we either have 1 person or 2 in each quadrant, and they're only counting the birds that are leaving their quadrant, not coming to their quadrant. If it's really so many birds, we're counting by 5s, we're counting by 10s. When so many Broadwings are coming over, sometimes we're counting by 50s. So you can't, you're right, you can't count individual birds. You just have to kind of do your best. And then we're yelling out our counts to the poor counter and they have to write down all these numbers and add them up at the end of the day. Does that answer that question?
Yeah, I would just add to that, that if we say we saw 2,000 Broadwings in a couple of hours, we're probably off by, 5%, but it's difficult to be very precise on that. So
Right.
at Veracruz, they actually have 3 counters who photograph and count the dots in the photos to verify what their numbers are from what they wrote down. And they usually find about a 5 to 10% variation from what they saw. And interestingly, usually the dots are smaller than what they saw. So what that means, I have no idea. It's kind of interesting that they in a sense might be overcounting a little bit, but they might see 1 million Broadwings in a day.
Yeah, so you kind of got to cut them some slack.
You count by thousands then.
I'm sure we're undercounting. We see stuff way too far to the east and way too far to the west. It's just out of our range, And the ones going over that probably are higher up than we can actually see with binoculars.
Hazim had a follow-up too. I mean, what if other species are mixed in there with the Broadwings? Is that?
Yeah, we have to count them too.
You gotta, all right.
Yep. And again, we're gonna say, well, there goes an immature red tail, or there goes a, there goes a red tail, or we just have to, or a red-shouldered, we just have to be quick, or, oh, look, there's 2 ospreys following each other, there's a bald eagle. I mean, we just have to kind of quickly tell the counter what's happening.
I would say it's pretty rare for a red tail or a red-shouldered to move with and the same way as the Broadwings. When you see Broadwings move, you realize, as Vicky said earlier, that the behavior is one big cue to what the species.
They just spiral up. They don't mess around. They just quickly get into a thermal and go. They're very fast soaring little birds. They're made for it. Are any Swainson's hawk questions? Again, super rare, just something to think about, that they may come through Illinois, or it may be worth a trip up to Kane County to see a nesting pair that I'm not quite sure what was happening this year with them. Our last video species, true or false? If you see a flying rough-legged hawk turn and like bank, and you can see the base of its tail is white, you can be pretty sure it is a light morph. That is true. It's very true. A light morph rough-legged has a white base of the tail. Here's another picture of the window on an immature hawk. See how it's whiter out here? It looks like he's missing some brown paint. That's how you can know it's a juvenile, plus all these tail bands, kind of thin multiple tail bands. True or false? Aging and sexing rough-legged hawks is a simple process, super easy. That is so not true. But we're going to take a stab at it. So every rough-legged hawk has beautiful long wings and these nice carpal patches. If you see those dark ovals on a bird, it's got to be a rough leg. It can be a light morph or it can be a dark morph. And there are also intermediate morphs. Not sure I've ever seen an intermediate morph. Young birds have this pretty thick belly band, and look at this tail. It's kind of gray. It doesn't really have any banding going on. This one's got a few bands, but they're really pale. And see his belly band? If you look at the angles of these two birds, this looks like it has a long wing, and this looks almost like the posture of a red tail, doesn't it? The angle of a bird can change. Also, the sun is just shining on that guy. Where it gets a little trickier is with males and females, and I put those in quotes because I learned something just this week. I'm not sure it's going to change how I bird, but it's something for all of us to think about. Supposedly, male rough-leggeds have browner heads, not much of a belly band, maybe one tail band with another one here. If you start looking at pictures of supposed male rough-leggeds on Macaulay, they can have banded tails up to here. Females supposedly have a whiter head, a thicker belly band, and a very thick band here. Oh gosh, Vic, I'm so sorry. This is Vic Berardi's beautiful picture of a female rough-legged, because there isn't any picture on eBird on their main page of a female rough-legged hawk in flight. I edited this slide and I forgot that, Vic. My apologies. You're thanked in the last slide though. But this week I got this in-hand guide to diurnal North American raptors. It's all from, banding hawks, that they say that there's just no way you can tell what a rough-legged hawk is unless you're measuring the wing cord, which is from here to here. It's a lot longer on females. There's just no overlap between females and males. Well, obviously we wouldn't be able to see that in the field, but every field guide will tell you can tell males and females apart. So I just be cautious about that. So what are these? Does this hawk have a browner head or a whiter head? It doesn't really have a belly band. Has kind of a thick tail band. Maybe there's another one here. Would we call that a male? And how about this one? Is that head brown or white? There's a belly band. There's a pretty thick tail band. So looks like a female, maybe. There's people here with a lot more experience than I with rough legs. Dark morphs. Supposedly the males are darker, like black, and the females are more russet. Again, in that book, oh, look at the carpal patches. No, it's a rough leg. I think it's really hard to tell males and females apart, especially in Illinois in winter. We never seem to have sunny days, so our light is poor. Even white on the upper wing doesn't necessarily mean it's a juvenile, I guess. So just maybe enjoy rough legs and don't worry about trying to age them. Any questions about rough-leggeds? All right, thanks everyone. We're in the home stretch. So what are these
I have a
videos?
question though, actually.
Oh, okay.
about tail bands between the Broadwing and the red shoulder. Is there a way to really tell the tail bands apart between those two birds, or is it really just a matter of looking at other things?
Well, it's really both the immature Broadwing and immature red-shouldered have multiple tail bands. So if you're looking at a perched bird, you're going to see those tail bands when it's perched from underneath, right? If you could look at the tail of a red-shouldered though, even if it's an immature, it's going to be longer, way longer than a broadwing hawk, and it's going to have many, many more little white bands going across the tail, like those thin chalk lines we've been talking about. If you could see an adult and it's facing away from you, you're going to see 3 really prominent black tail bands on the tail. It's 3 bands long. A broadwing, you're only going to see 2. If you're lucky, you might see 1.5. You might see the white one and the end black one. Does that make sense? It's a lot easier to see their tails when they're flying. And if we think back to the pictures of the red shoulders flying, they had multiple tail bands. Even the adults. Does that answer your question, Steve?
Yeah, it's Rena's question. I think you answered it.
Oh,
we have
Rita.
another question just came in, and it's about rough legs. Is the way rough legs fly distinctive?
Good question. They fly in a dihedral, so their wings are held up. I think any hawk with really long wings tends to fly with its wing tips, like its wings held up and back, swept back. It has to do something with those wings, and they're lighter birds too. So yeah, a rough leg glides on like in a V shape, and it soars maybe with more flapping than a red tail. It kind of seems to flap more when it's circling up, and it does a lot of hovering. It's really comfortable hovering. If you've ever driven down 88 or 80 and seen one in the wintertime, it just seems like they're constantly hovering. Kiting is maybe a little harder because they're lighter birds.
All right.
Okay. I think in the general sense, you'll never see, for example, a red-shouldered hover.
No, they live in different habitats. They live in the forest.
Go ahead. I'm sorry, Vicky.
Go ahead.
No, I was going to say, Swainson's red-tails, rough legs can hover, but red shoulders really don't hover, nor do broadwings.
Exactly. And I forgot to mention about the rough-legged. When you see it coming in from far away, their wing beats pretty floppy. They may even remind you like a dark morph of an eagle temporarily. They're just really long, floppy wing beats. Did that answer that person's question about rough legs flying? All righty. So what are these beautios? Well, what do we see in picture 1? I see patagial bars. I see a belly band. I see nice fine barring all over this tail. So I think that's an immature red tail. Also, he looks like he's hovering, which red tails do. I can't see the color of the throat. I don't really know if it's an Eastern or Western. I have no idea. Number 2, I see carpal patches, long wings. I know that's a rough-legged. This bird has a belly band. If I'm seeing this photo right, there's not much tail banding going on. It just looks gray down there. So I think that's an immature light morph. Number 3, long pointed wings, 4 long primaries, a white throat. This is an immature light morph Swainson's. As far as I know, that's how it was labeled. I guess I buy that because it has a white throat. They don't get that bibbed look until they're 2. This hawk, thin line back here, thin tail band, kind of paring knife blade shaped hands, or wings, I'm sorry. That's an immature broadwing. This hawk, it's flying away. That's the hardest angle to figure out what a hawk is. Maybe this will answer that question about the red shoulder's tail. You see this crescent on the underwing? You see this crescent on the upper wing, tougher to see. A long, thin, dark tail with thin white chalk lines. That's a red-shouldered. Look at how many tail bands you can see. This is a long tail. It's a nice rudder for them to hunt in the forest. How did everybody do? Did you get those right? Or did you get them right after the presentation, I hope? Thank you to everybody. Thanks to the club for giving us the opportunity to talk about hawks and the Hawkwatch. Oh, I wish that we could have gotten the Hawkwatch international videos, but again, you just have to come up and watch hawks fly. Thanks to people for photos, Vic Berardi, the club for your support, especially Steve. Cindy Hedges is our advocate at the Forest Preserve District, and the regulars. And next week, feel free to join us when we separate out the falcons, the accipiters. Those are two harder groups of hawks, I think. Balds and Goldens, and then aging harriers.
Thank you very much, Vicky and Bob. Excellent presentation.
Should I not stop sharing my screen? Is that the deal?
You can do whatever you want, Vicky. You're in control.
Any questions that, there was a question just now, is it a DBC presentation next week? And the answer is yes.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
So everyone who's registered for this one will get an invite to that, so you won't have to, if everything goes according to how I think it will, you will not have to re-register.
Yeah, so if you can join us, terrific, you know?
Yeah.
And you'll learn everything you ever wanted to know, but were afraid to ask about accipiters. So
It's hard to do that in less than an hour. You have to spend hours and hours. Oh, Priscilla, number 5 was a red-shouldered hawk. An immature red-shouldered.
Yeah. Well, we had an audience member named Red-tailed Hawk, and they enjoyed the presentation. So
I'm
that's good.
so glad.
I guess you did a good job with distinguishing among them and
I'm
their
so
rivals.
Any other questions? Yeah, just, take another look at hawks this fall. Really try to watch them as much as you can.
one last comment. Unfortunately, because of COVID and because of the Forest Preserve District rules,
Yeah.
we are very much restricted this year. And unfortunately, for example, we couldn't even accept new volunteers. We frankly hope that will change for 2021. The hill is open on, it opens up at 11 a.m. on Saturday and Sunday, and it stays open till 6. And as Vicky pointed out, the 26th or the 27th could be both. There's at least a possibility, if the winds are right, that we could see a fair number of Broadwings on one or the other of those days. So if you've never been to a Hawkwatch before, even if it isn't a big Broadwing day, come up sometime later this month or in October and take a look in the sky with us. And I think you'll find it interesting. If it's raining, we won't be there, so don't bother to come up.
Bob, somebody asked what time to come on the 26th and 27th, and it's 11 o'clock. That's when the hawk opens, to the hill opens to the public.
Right. Up till
11
then.
o'clock, Saturday, Sunday.
And that's true through the end of October. It's open every weekend. The only qualifier I would place on that is the district can, at its own prerogative, if they decide they've got a problem, they can shut it down. So, but as far as we know, at the moment, it will be open. You can drive up to the top. There's no refreshment stand up there, unfortunately, but there is a porta potty.
So bring food, bring water. Was there another question that scrolled by me? I don't see the chat.
How was migration today? Jerry asked.
We had a few hawks. They were all silhouettes because it was dark. It was cloudy. It was very cold. We had a peregrine go, an osprey, a couple red tails, broadwings. So Priscilla, you do not need to register. Just come on up on the 26th and 27th. And we stay there till 6. It's open till 6. We're not always there till 6, but sometimes Broadwings come in the late afternoon too. So on a Broadwing day, we just may never leave.
Yeah, it's an interesting place to be, and you actually never know what's going to fly over. Our species list is up somewhere in the 170s, but we make no guarantees what you're going to see.
Steve, Beth is asking, will we have a PDF of the slides? This is getting recorded and it's going to go on the website.
Mm-hmm. No, on the YouTube page. anyway.
YouTube.
And we'll link from the homepage. I don't know about your slides. It's up to you if you want to share them somehow. We can maybe put them on the meetings page if you would like, or I could try emailing them. But if if you'd rather not share them, that's fine.
I think we could create a PDF if that's one option anyway.
Make it a smaller file, maybe.
Yeah.
Okay.
And let me ask the regulars how they feel about with their photos of themselves and their let me just see. I probably have to get another round of permission maybe. So.
Okay. Well, that'll be pending, and I'll try to be sure it stays on the page. The meetings page changes because new meetings are always coming along. So.
Yeah.
Yeah, we have our October one. That's going to be Tara Beveroth about owls and nightjars. So that'll be
That'll be great.
Our next big club meeting, although we'll have a hawk meeting or two between them. So. All right. Any other questions? I guess everybody looks pretty content that I can see anyway. So.
Thank you, everybody. Thanks for spending time with us tonight.
Yeah, it's really nice seeing so many people. It's great. It's
Good
one
to
of the
see
great
everybody's
things about
faces again. Yeah, it was really nice.